And we are live. Press pause with Vig Villain, episode 3. I'm clearly the host, Vig Villain, aka Jeff. We have got a good show for you today, I think. I almost didn't do episode 3 tonight. Obviously, this is something I'm just kind of kicking off, just getting going. But I was getting sucked into some video games and didn't want to jump on. But here we are. I'm on. We are one pint of Pilsner deep, but we're going to have a good show for you. Excited to talk about it. You can see over here, I've got some Sniper Elite 5 footage going. They recently put out the start of their season 2 DLCs, like the season pass for the second year. I'm a sucker for Sniper Elite. It's one of those games that even though I can recognize some of its issues, it's maybe not like a totally polished AAA big budget game. I do think it's like right on the edge. It's not really AA. The quality is very high. I love the gameplay. I love the loop. I get sucked in. I try to do all of the missions, all of the DLC, for a lot of reasons, man. I really have a soft spot for this game from Rebellion. I really like that it's one of the few, I feel like, kind of big games still running on a in-house proprietary engine. I think it's called Asura. I could be butchering that, but they do use their own proprietary engine for this and their games, where more and more games are using Unity or even more so Unreal. This game, at this level of polish and graphical fidelity, it's cool. It's from a third party. It's not a first party platform with their engine. It's something pretty unique. I really like the gameplay. I love these sort of mechanics here. This is kind of what I've been playing this week. And recently, today, actually, I got sucked into Hitman Freelancer for the first time, which, yeah, kind of knocked my socks off. I didn't want to put it down. I begrudgingly came here to stream live on YouTube and talk to no one. But here I am, very excited to do so because this is obviously just a hobby for me, but it is something I want to take serious. It is something I'm passionate about. And if I don't have this outlet, I'm just going to talk my fiance's ear off or bore my friends with gaming news and trivia. So instead, technical difficulties, y'all. I think we're back. It's moving, so I can't hear anymore, so I'm assuming we're back though. There it is, just kicked in. Sorry for the technical difficulties, but we are back on. I'm gonna try not to hit this mic and knock it loose again. It's a learning process, y'all. But yeah, so we kind of cover what I've been playing. I know I'd been speaking about Nier Automata the last couple weeks, but I had to take a break for Sniper Elite, and I'm such a sucker for this kind of gameplay that pulled me into, like I said, trying Hitman Freelancer Edition. It combines that sort of stealth sandbox with roguelite elements. I like both genres, so I'm in on that for sure. But let's kind of dive into some interesting stuff. I think the big news this week that a lot of people were talking about was the UK CMA narrowing the scope of their concerns for the Microsoft Activision deal, right? And so Tom Warren at The Verge was the first to come through with this, or at least that I saw, that they had put out a provisional statement saying, hey, we've looked at this, we've taken in our findings, and we're actually no longer concerned with a foreclosure or lessening of competition on the console side of things, right? Basically saying we don't think Microsoft will have the ability to inhibit PlayStation from competing in the market if they were to foreclose with Call of Duty. And the big reason was they don't think Microsoft would foreclose with Call of Duty. They had done some math on the initial statement, and Microsoft's last statement to them sort of called out that math and just kind of said, hey, we think your model is wrong. And basically what the CMA was looking at was 5 years of a new Xbox user, right? So the idea of, let's say Call of Duty is foreclosed Xbox takes it away from PlayStation. So a lot of people come over from PlayStation to the Xbox. They looked at 5 years of revenue from that user based off 1 year of loss of sales on PlayStation. So Microsoft's point was, hey, it should be 5 years to 5 years, right? Or 1 year to 1 year. CMA agreed in their statement. They reran the models, and basically they said any model we ran, anything we looked at as far as like options Microsoft might have, we see them losing billions by pulling Call of Duty titles from PlayStation. So we don't think that's going to be an issue, which I think is the right decision. I think, obviously these regulators needed to look at a deal this size, almost $70 billion, right? Like they wouldn't be doing their jobs if they weren't taking this very seriously, really scrutinizing it. I do think for a while Sony was running the narrative with how dangerous this is, but I think as regulators look at the math and look at what this is going to close. I do think you're going to see approval from the EU. You're going to see approval from the CMA. I think the FTC is going to hold out a little bit longer. I don't know if it goes to court, but I think it is likely. Regardless of what politics you are, or if you even follow like American politics, the FTC right now has shown with a lot of the cases they're bringing, like against Facebook's parent company Meta, with the Within trial, which they lost, that they're blocking mergers, and it looks like the main reason is to sort of try to put a chilling effect on big tech mergers, right? The idea is that like, hey, you better be really sure about this merger or really need it, because we are gonna oppose it. They seem to be opposing pretty much every merger, so I think it's very likely that continues to be the case with this, and Microsoft, if not goes to court over it, that there is going to be it's going to be a longer period of time before the FTC rolls over, right? They're not going to say, oh, well, the EU and the CMA approved it, we should too, let's go with that. I do think Microsoft is going to have to work with the FTC a little bit longer, and maybe courts avoided. If it's not, or if it is, we'll probably see this close over the summer. If court is the inevitable option, then I think that will go to trial in August here in the States. And I think Microsoft has a very good case. I think the FTC is going to have a hard time proving that, these additional studios are going to give them a monopoly, and that with all the contracts Microsoft is signing and offering, that they're going to be able to make a case for Microsoft foreclosing Call of Duty from rivals, whether that's on console or cloud or PC. In addition to that, I think Microsoft has a very strong case that even if they were to pull Call of Duty, PlayStation is going to be just fine and able to compete, right? I think when you look at the numbers and you look at worldwide how they're already stacked, I just don't think Call of Duty is like a game that can, crush PlayStation. I think that's been absurd from the get-go. Obviously, I think it's going to maybe, I don't want to say damage, but it's going to put some strain on PlayStation, right? Microsoft having Microsoft having Call of Duty is going to put some strain on them, but that's healthy competition. With Microsoft spending this amount of money, that's going to lead to healthy competition, where obviously PlayStation has to respond, right? You can't make a $70 billion acquisition and your competition just shrugs it off like, oh yeah, no big deal. It's gonna have an effect, and I think that effect is this. I think if you pull back bird's eye view, PlayStation's main problem with this is, well, there's a few, but I think one is currently PlayStation is able to offer a marketing deal to Activision for COD. So PlayStation players get a better experience than PC or Xbox players, in that they get early access to the beta. They have exclusive weapon skins, exclusive missions. Previously we'd seen entire game modes be exclusive to PlayStation for almost a year, right? So they get these things first, they get these things best, and I think with that going away, PlayStation not being able to tie their console to Call of Duty, and for the average consumer kind of be like, this is where you go to play this game, that's hurtful. The other thing that I think is a bigger issue is Microsoft is going to put Call of Duty on Game Pass, and they're going to offer it for 10 or 15 bucks a month, whatever your plan is. You're going to be able to get Call of Duty in addition to everything else you get. They've offered Sony the ability to also put Call of Duty on PlayStation Plus, but that comes with a licensing deal, obviously, right? Where Sony is going to be paying out, fees to have it on their subscription service. The issue there for PlayStation is they've already worked out the business model for PS Plus. They already have a lineup of what games they have. They have a budget essentially, right, for PS Plus. They have a game plan for it. having to suddenly pay for Call of Duty is going to be quite expensive for them. On the other hand, though they can still offer it transactionally to their players, it's a bad look if they're selling a game for $70 that Microsoft has in their subservice. That said, I don't think PlayStation having to pay out this licensing fee and spend money where they previously didn't have to is necessarily anti-competitive. This is going to light a fire under PlayStation to do a couple of things. One, figure out how to fit this into their budget, right? Because they need to be able to offer Call of Duty to their players. But two, start figuring out how to make a competing service. PlayStation has said, we don't think we can make something that competes with Call of Duty. And I do get their point that it's not just about making a game as good as Call of Duty. It's about making a game that can pull in those players, right? Players who are loyal to that game already. How do you build a player base when you've already got sort of an entrenched player base in your competition, right? So they do have that ahead of them, but obviously they're trying, right? They have these 12 live service games they're going to be launching. The idea that they don't think those are going to compete with existing live service games like Call of Duty, like Fortnite, they wouldn't be trying it if they didn't think it could compete in that model. So they're clearly already have things in the works. I think this is only going to light a fire under them to do more. I'd love to see PlayStation coming out with a live service shooter that's that they have control of, right? Whether that is going to be just on the PlayStation, I think it's more likely it would be PlayStation and PC. Furthermore, I think what's interesting is that you could see, let me adjust that. I keep messing this up. We're going to figure out all the technical issues. Don't you worry, y'all. But I think one thing that's interesting we could see from PlayStation, and I said this in the very first video I ever made back when Microsoft first announced their intent to acquire ABK, is that I think what Microsoft is afraid of is Sony partnering with a larger tech player. I think this might, if I were in Sony's shoes, if I were in the shoes of, okay, we got to decide how do we get PlayStation competing with where Microsoft clearly wants to take Xbox. I think what you need to look at is partnering with a true cloud provider. Just imagine if Google hadn't launched Stadia with the arrogance of like kicking down the door of a party that's been having like a 20-year conversation and being like, oh, we're going to blow your minds with what we do, right? Think about if Google had the wherewithal to silently partner with something like Sony or Nintendo to offer their subscription service through the cloud, right? So I think you could see something like a partnership with either Amazon or Google of PS Plus, very tiny letters, powered by Stadia. I think that would be a compelling option from PlayStation. But we'll see. They do have an Azure partnership with Microsoft. I wonder if that's going to stay in the gaming space. Obviously, there were a couple years back, you saw Jim Ryan kind of talking about, we have things in the work, we're looking at it. I know that, or it seems to me that the Azure partnership with Sony is more along the lines of Sony Semiconductor Solutions, another subsidiary of Sony Corp, separate from PlayStation, obviously, where we just saw in the beginning of the year, I talked about this last video, I think, but January, February, they had rolled out their sort of Internet of Things sensor solution that was a little bit Orwellian, but that was through the Azure marketplace for businesses. I think we'll probably see that continue if it's successful. I'm curious to see if after all this is done, though, they're going to want to take their gaming division through Azure as well for a cloud solution, or if they're going to look to partner with something like AWS or Google's cloud, which I think could be very interesting and could be a compelling answer to what Microsoft is obviously planning with Game Pass, right? And I do think cloud is going to be a lot more prevalent as this generation ages and into the next generation. I think you're going to see the latency on cloud improve. You're going to see more people adopting cloud, especially as TVs begin to offer apps. You can just get an Xbox app right in your Samsung. I think that's going to spread to other TVs. I think you're going to see PlayStation get in on that. I've said before, I'm very interested to see what Nintendo does with their next console and what it's going to look like into the next into the next generation, right? Are they going to have to look at things like remote play and cloud? As I think it could be very interesting to see the next the next Nintendo be a home console again that allows you to remote play to any device, including your Switch and Switch Lite. So imagine if you could keep that hardware alive. Everything that will work on it works on it. The new games can cloud play to that device, keeping that device alive, keeping maybe even sales of Switch lights up, but also allowing you to remote cast it to your phone if you'd like. That would allow Nintendo to focus on a console that targets high resolution, that targets 4K, which I think is going to be something they need to do, right? It's one thing to be where we're at now in 23 with the Switch still targeting 1080 on screen, 720p handheld. I don't know what that looks like if they launch a new system in 24, and we're in 2028, 2029, and the Nintendo device is 1080p, targeting 30 FPS, right? I just don't think that has legs for this next generation. So I think they're gonna have to find a way to hit that. And when you look at things like the Steam Deck and what others are doing in the space, it seems like having a handheld that can have that sort of power is going to either be prohibitively expensive or prohibitively. We're not going to try and say it. It's going to be too big. All right, that handheld's going to be a big mamma jamma. It's going to be a bit too large. So I think that's going to be interesting to see. I lost my train of thought because you can totally see me just die right there in the footage. Explosion was bigger than I thought. But yeah, that sort of wraps up my thought there. I got way off track. I don't know how we started talking about Nintendo when I'm trying to talk about the CMA narrowing their scope. I need to learn how to narrow my scope, I guess. But just to kind of jump on that a little bit before I move on, one thing they did say was they're still looking at cloud. The CMA made clear, hey, this doesn't mean that the deal is going to be totally approved. We're still looking at what's going on with the cloud. I do think though there's a lot less room there because the market's very small. There's nobody to foreclose right now, right? I mean, you're looking at something that's growing. And I think the deals Microsoft is signing with people is going to go a long way towards showing regulators that, hey, we're wanting to make this open to everybody. We're not trying to use COD as a battering ram to, destroy cloud providers or destroy consoles. I do think Microsoft's in a position right now where they want other cloud providers to be successful, because what they need right now is user engagement. And it doesn't matter if that's with their cloud product or another's. They need to get gamers to adopt the cloud. So I think maybe in 10 years, they are going to start to pull things back and narrow where that game is available. But they are giving competitors, I think as far as tech goes, 10 years is plenty of time to come up with solutions while still being able to kind of pull people in with a game as powerful as COD. I still think, like I said in my very first video over a year ago, Microsoft's main goal with this is making a store and using gaming overall as their way of getting user engagement, the likes of other big tech companies. Satya Nadella did say that he sees Microsoft's space in gaming similar to the way Meta has social media, Amazon has shopping, Apple has phones. Microsoft, when they said they were all in, they meant it, right? I think this is something that they're very focused on doing here. So that's that. I should have jumped over to this. I know Games Industry Biz this week kind of talked about that, right? That that Microsoft was, they announced, hey, we're doing a mobile games app store to rival Apple and Google. I don't think this was news. Microsoft had put this in filings with the CMA. They'd announced it long before. This is something that is happening. I just think, Phil Spencer gave another interview where it popped off and people ran with it again. But look, this is something that is coming. I think people need to be ready for it. I think a lot of what Microsoft is going to be focused on this generation going forward is cloud gaming, right? When they talk about reaching 3 billion gamers, they're not talking about stealing Nintendo and PlayStation customers. That's way too small of a jump for them. 3 billion gamers, they're talking about mobile gamers. It's the only way. They're talking about people who play Candy Crush. They're talking about people who don't currently own a console, who haven't been convinced by gaming yet. The way you reach them, it's like you don't reach them by making a better Call of Duty or making a better Halo. The way you reach gamers who haven't jumped in yet is by coming up with new games outside of it, right? That's one of the reasons you see Microsoft so focused on, we want to look at developers and game experiences outside of where we're already strong, right? Outside of, the North America, Europe, Japan. They want to start looking at games being made in Africa, games being made in South America, games being made in, Polynesian regions, right? Like they want to start looking outside the box, right? They want to look at more diversity, right? Because you need to pull more people in. I think that's one of the reasons I think Candy Crush is such a strong thing for Microsoft and King is Candy Crush gets you a whole different demographic than PC and console gaming. That's really vital to them. They want to build those kind of experiences. I think they want to maintain PC and console games, but I don't think that all of their resources or all of their focus is going to be on that. I think they're going to have to spread out a little bit, and I think that's one of the reasons they want to push into mobile. And ABK is it's the vehicle, right? It's it's a turnkey. You buy it, you're into mobile. You're a big player in mobile, and you can make that push. So I no doubt I think that's where they're headed and what they're going to do. But let's jump over to kind of my last little piece of news. Atari making night moves. They have purchased Night Dive Studio, which is, kind of has been in the news recently because they are coming out with the new System Shock remake, which I think is going to be very interesting there. But we are seeing Atari do this, and I think it's interesting, right? Because Atari is one of those names that obviously they were, they're one of the they're the early big name in consoles, right? Out of Atari spawned, things like, people leaving Atari to found Activision. Actually, you see that the original CEO of Atari started like Chuck E. Cheese, which was a huge arcade movement early on. Atari obviously was a big name. This is no longer that same company. The name remains, all the IP remains, but this is obviously a different corporate entity. But I'm interested. I've been watching more and more. I didn't think the Atari console they put out a few years back was compelling, but watching the remasters or recharged games, as they're calling them, that have been coming out onto other platforms, it's been a little bit interesting. I think they're priced aggressively. I think most of them, at least on the Xbox store, were like $9.99 for like a very kind of retooled, modernized version of things like Asteroid or Centipede. That's been interesting to see what they're doing there. So seeing them grab a studio like Night Dive, which has kind of become very well known for their ability to remaster and remake games, I just think, man, maybe Atari is something, or a company to watch. They seem to be making some moves. I don't know if they're going to come out with another console or ever be big in that space. I actually question if anyone can step into the console space ever again. I'm personally of the belief that we are maybe like one more console generation after this one, away from everything just being PC. Otherwise, you're going to go cloud, or, I think we could even see a future where there's graphics cards jammed into TVs, and at that point, what do you need a console for? Everything will be apps on your TV if they're, as the technology becomes more prevalent, more powerful. So I think that's interesting, where you'll see enthusiasts running things on PC and accessing games that way. Obviously, I think there'll be a retro market for years to come. Obviously, people still grab vinyl, so it's not going anywhere. But I don't know that you're going to see big splashes beyond, say, like PS6 and whatever the hell name Xbox and Nintendo come up with for their next ones. But that's kind of all the news I sort of had. This is a little bit of a shorter episode, like I said. There were a few things I wanted to touch on and kind of talk about there, but for the most part, that's where I see kind of the big stories this week. Obviously, some other things popped up, but I don't want this channel to be something where I just talk about every news item that hits in gaming and I'm just chasing headlines. I want to make sure it's stuff that catches my eye, that I find interesting, that I think is worth discussing. I think a lot of the headlines are just very like, please click on me, and I don't want to give that more oxygen. So there are going to be weeks, I guess, where episodes are shorter because I don't actually see a ton to talk about news wise. And obviously you can see I've got the deal. I'm never going to figure that out. I got to point this way. It's opposite of my monitors. I'm sorry, y'all, but to my one viewer, thank you. You can see I've got the DLC here, which is a couple weeks old. Obviously, there's bigger games out right now, like the RE4 remake, but I'm personally not big on Resident Evil because I am a little scaredy cat baby, and I've never really jumped into Resident Evil. Don't do a lot of survival horror. Maybe I should try it. I don't know. There's plenty of games beyond that. So I'm like I feel like the lone prophet in the desert, not playing that game right now. But I will have to jump into survival horror this year because Alan Wake 2 is apparently going to be a true survival horror. Sam Lake from Remedy Studios had mentioned that two Game Awards ago when they first announced Alan Wake 2. Or was it this last one? I don't know. But Sam Lake had announced that Alan Wake 2 is going to be their first true survival horror, which I felt that was a personal attack because I found the first Alan Wake, while it is one of my like favorite games, I found it to be scary enough and like a true horror. Um, but apparently the folks at Remedy don't agree, and they're going to try to make Alan Wake 2 even scarier. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, now I'm just kind of rambling off the cuff here. So we are going to go ahead and wrap things up with that. It was like I said, a quick episode this week, but I think we touched on everything we needed to touch on. If you watched this live, I know there were a couple people in and out, or if you get to this week, on VOD, I'd love to hear any comments you had, anything you disagree with, or where you think the industry's going, or if you think I am a huge baby for being scared of Alan Wake and too scared to play RE4 Remake. Yeah, I'd love to hear it in the comments. If you enjoyed the video at all, please like it. Go ahead and subscribe. I do this every Sunday afternoon into the evening. Haven't really narrowed down a time yet. I'm trying to get better about that. I think we're going to try and do 6 Central going forward. But like I said, this is only the 3rd episode, and so it's still a little bit in the flim flam man territory. We're a little wibbly wobbly on the time and the length, but we're going to get all that hammered down. So to my one viewer who's still watching right now live, thank you very much. To everybody who catches this in the future. Also,